More Age of Sigmar is here!
Spiking bits.
So besides the Carrion Empire, we also have full-on release, well not full-on, but supplemental releases for both the Skaven and the Flesh Eater courts as well for Age of Sigmar this week. So it's going to be a tough week to balance your Valentine's Day purchases if you have a significant other, and perhaps you're either Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k ones as well. So coming in hot are, of course, new scenery pieces, which are kind of must-have because they're 0 points. So these guys right here, you got the Skaven Gnawholes. Say that 10 times fast. I can barely talk as it is. As you already know, I've noticed your comments in the videos here. This is $55 US. They also have endless spells as well. Some of these, I don't know about this spell, and we'll talk about that. Hopefully we have time. We're gonna try to keep this to about 15 minutes, but we'll see with the previews of the books right here. Obviously, there's people with 1 hour long videos, and we don't need to do that here, but I want to show you some brief overviews and talk about a couple of things real quick out there as well. Skaven endless spells are $35. Of course, you got the 2 Battletomes. Really don't need to talk about that as much. They're both $40. The Skaven one's a little bit thicker. I think it's 130 pages because it's the super Battletome, the new keyword. Every keyword there is for it's all Skaven tied now. I don't know what's going on with that. And then we've got the Charnel Throne right here, and I forget how much this one is. This one is $35, and then the endless spells are $35 as well, and there's some really good ones right here. So if you're Flesh Eater courts, you're definitely gonna want to scoop those up, I would imagine, as well as the Charnel Throne too. Oh, and last but certainly not least, these sassy little dice right here, which are pretty cool looking, and we'll get to those in a minute. They're not quite as over the top as the squig dice, but I like these. Okay, so first up, we got the Flesh Eater Courts. Obviously, this is a smaller book. There isn't as many units in the Flesh Eater Courts. Actually, I want to say there's only 4 box sets, to be quite honest. But regardless of all that, it is another wonderfully laid out book, of course. You know, for being $35 for about 20 to 30 less pages than what we would normally expect. Here you can kind of see how they break it all down. It's nothing new that we haven't seen before. You got all the war scrolls. Your pitch battle profiles, also your points and stuff at the back, your allegiance abilities, your traits, your spells, all that stuff up here. You got painted miniatures, you got background and stuff like that. So it all pretty much follows the same layout that you would expect. Lots and lots of story, backstory. Of course, you know, nearly 4 years into the Mortal Realms, we've got a lot of backstory and stuff, and that's cool to see. Then they've got these different grand courts, which are actually represented in the rules too, which is kind of cool. And then you've got your painted mini section, and something new they've started doing is adding in a section on how to paint your miniatures, which is really good for the Flesh Eater courts because they're so bloody and different. You can really screw that up if you're not careful, but with the dark and drab colors, adding a little bit of blood seems like a good idea, or maybe some purples or something, and they give you a great guide right down to the basing on how to do that. Then they jump into the abilities and the traits and all the different things that you need to know, all your artifacts, your mount, special powers, your actual spells. There's all sorts of stuff in here that you're going to need. Then you've got the terrain piece, which is actually really good in game, and we'll talk about that when we look at it here in a second. Of course, it's 0 points, so you're going to want it. See what they did there? And then there's your grand courts. I think there's 4 of these. Yeah, there's 4 of those. And then it gets into your battalions, your super battalion, or excuse me, those are your battle plans. Your battalions are right here. There's your battalions, and you got the super battalion and a smattering of other battalions too, much not unlike the Gloomspite gets. And then you've got all of your normal war scrolls. Remember, there isn't that many models. A lot of these kits make 2 of them, and then of course you got the new guy that comes in the Carrion Empire box, which we should be a different video up right about now. And then there's the points. So pretty easy. Let's dive into the rest of the kits for them. Of course, if you're looking for the Skaven, those will be at the end here. So next up is Flesh Eater courts. So their endless spells are pretty interesting. Of course, this is all designed in the UK, made in China, full size, I think, for the most part. Yep, 100% as on the back of the box. The barricade, the cadaverous barricade, actually is its own base, where the other ones have separate bases. Now, real quick, you got the Dread Knight / Flying Stand base. You got a 50 mil base there. Here's your instructions, and here's the 2 sprues that are gonna come in here. But before we look at those, let's talk about this. So how do they go together? Pretty easily. You got your standard left and right kind of halves, and then it builds around in a circle. For the Cadaverous Barricade, there's a left and right half, and then you kind of clamshell the little fence piece is together. And then for the Corpse Mirror Stampede, they are kind of left and right halves in certain areas, and other areas it's just like fully formed, but then there's like a left half kind of thing, and they all go together and kind of come up out of the ground on that larger base there. Now, as far as rules go, they're all actually pretty good, except for the Chalice. I'm not, or no, excuse me, I was thinking about the Bell for the Skaven. The Bell's kind of weird, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So this one here, the Corpse Mirror Stampede, this one's pretty cool because you can sling it out 3d6 to the caster, so on average that's what, 9, and moves up to 14. You can always move it because it's a predatory spell. It does a lot of damage. After this model is moved, roll 5 dice for each unit, and any models that passed across. For each roll that is more than the unit's wounds characteristic, it suffers 1 mortal wound. Obviously, that's going to happen quite frequently, and it's going to cause a lot of mortal wounds. For a natural roll of 6, or excuse me, for each roll of 6, it suffers D3. That's crazy! Holy cow, that's a good one. Chalice here, this one's really interesting. It allows you to get back wounds, or I think actually to add 1 whole slain model. Remember, some of these are 3 wound models, so getting them back after the fact that it took so long to kill them, because there's a lot of, you know, deflections, 6 up, you ignore this wound, and you can bring them back with different, it's crazy. The ability to just poof, get 1 back could be pretty huge, or just save that last wound. Pretty nuts. Cadaverous Barricade, this one's a little bit, this is the opposite. This is basically your wall. You just kind of slap it up in front of you. Let me read this right here because it's a little hard to read from my angle. It's it's anybody that within 1 inch, wholly within 1 inch. If you target a unit, then they get the effects of cover, which is kind of nice. If a model starts within 3 inches of this model, then they have to half the distance they move, and I think you throw this out 1 inch away from enemy units and 24 inches away. So it gives you a little bit of cover, kind of breaks up. It's a barricade, so it is an obstacle. I do believe you have to go around it, so that would be kind of cool to mess kind of with the enemy there. Now, as far as the sprues go, you're going to want to be really careful, because up underneath and on all the tops here on this plane where the actual sprue connects, well, there's going to be a lot of flash, a lot of flash, and we're going to see this with some of the Skaven ones too, the little Skaven swarm kind of type deal. But other than that, it's pretty well formed for the most part. You've got that Chinese kind of chunkier injection molded plastic that there's going to be a lot of we'll call them Baer areas where it's just blank. Like, it's almost like you're painting an infinity model in some regards right there. So just take it easy, go slow, get your blends down. There's some hard edges that you might, if you're airbrushing them, you might be able to just go ahead and hit the hyper highlight the edge, or just blend it together with as best you can with some washes and things. It's kind of semi-challenging in that regard, but you might find it easier to paint than you imagined. I don't really know. And then over here, you've got a lot more detail on here with all the corpses and everything. It's kind of crazy. Lots and lots of detail from such a small and seemingly innocuous kit. You can do a bunch of rust effects and some oxide stuff in here, so you can really have fun and crack out of it as much as you want. Next up is the Charnel Throne, and I think this one was $35. It's got a little kind of pull-off lid that's really easy. It's 2 sprues, and the detail on it's actually pretty good. I was really surprised, you know, for this Chinese type plastic. They're getting better and better at the detail. Now, there isn't a lot of blank areas like we saw with the horses and stuff, and there's a couple different ways you could kind of go about putting this together. You don't necessarily have to be kind of pigeonholed into it for the flesh eater quartz. I could see where you could do a couple different things, or make some dioramas, or even kind of simplify it down to throw it on a plinth or something for it. A showcase piece. Whoa, super fuzzy. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. Like, you got the bottom piece, and you start to build up the wall superstructure around it. And then once you get to like this point right here, where you put the top of the step, or the landing of the steps, you can extend the stairs up if you want. But I mean, really, you can kind of just stop right here if you really want to. You can put the floor on it if you want, and then just put a model on it. Like, that's a perfectly good diorama by itself. This back here is a perfectly good diorama by itself. This chair could be off on something else, some super zombie kind of thing. Either way, if this isn't your thing or your army, you could do some different things with it. I feel like so it's kind of a neat kit in that regard. Now the rules for the throne, again, 0 points, so you're gonna want to auto include it. There's specific rules. I think you set it up anywhere in your zone. It has to be 9 away. I already showed you the codex, but there's specific rules that aren't in this war scroll right here that are actually in the Battletome. But that being said, it's inspiring scenery, and everybody else considers it sinister scenery. There's the explanation right there. And anytime you got the abhorrent Archangent, which I believe is the guy out of the Carrion Empire right there, you're going to be able to summon back Imperial Guard, or do the summon Imperial Guard command ability without spending a command point, which are actually really hard in Sigmar to get. If you're not familiar with it, it's actually pretty tough. So in addition, any Ghoul King within 1 inch can use the summon Men-at-Arms command as well without a command point being spent. So it's going to allow you to get a lot, replenish some losses, and keep those little squads as intact as possible throughout the game, as long as you're within a certain range of it. Which, like I said, you can throw it out. I believe it is 12 inches. You know what? This book is probably small enough that I can just flip it open and show it to you right at the end of that. I bet you it's right there, or it might be nope. Or it's at the end of this. Either way, I was really close. So here's the specifics. Wholly within 12 inches of an edge of the battlefield and more than 1 inches from an objective within your territory. So in your territory, within 12 of the battlefield, wholly within, and more than 1 inch from any objective. So there's where you can set it up. Next up is the Skaven. I think a lot of folks have been waiting for these guys finally to get their own super Battletome with all the keywords and everything in there. This is a 130-page book, which even by 40K standards is actually kind of big. So it's good to see them getting the props they deserve and not getting piecemealed out, and now having all of their different various clans all in one book. We got Skyer, Pestilence, Vermundus, Molder, Eshin, and of course all the Vermin Lords and all those cool other kits there, and the agents and all those things. So you've got the flush section, and then you've got all the painted models section, which look great, of course. And then you jump into painting your Skaven and the new sections that are actually in the books, where they used to take all that stuff out. So that's really cool, because a lot of these effects are actually hard to achieve. So having the warp glows and having all those different things, but I'm sure you will start seeing more of this in the White Dwarfs, hopefully going forward, maybe possibly next month. These guys kind of came out of nowhere, so not a lot of people were expecting them. And then you get into the rules. Now, Skaven Tide is the new super keyword for the super battle faction, so to speak, and everything kind of is keyed around that for the most part. But then there's like in particular, it's like where you've got the pestilence and things. Obviously, there's folks with 1 hour videos just on this book. So we're not going to spend that much time on it, other than show you that, hey, there's a bunch of stuff in here you need to know, all your command traits, all the different charts and things that you're going to need, your artifacts of power, your spells, all that sort of stuff. I mean, there's just tons and tons and tons of different things, spell lores, all your different particular clan abilities. It's all in here. Then you got your battle plans. Then it kicks over to or warbands and stuff for the Path to Glory. Then you got your war scrolls themselves, and then your war scroll battalions. There's actually a few of them in here, and if I'm not mistaken, the one for the Carrion Empire is not in here. You have to get that one out of, I don't think it's the Warp Cog. No, it's not. So you have to actually get that out of the other box. So there's an exclusive battle scroll exclusive battalion that's in the Carrion Empire box that has a points value, so it is valid in match play, as far as I can tell. I'm not a Sigmar expert, but I would imagine that is the thing there that makes it into it. So, and of course, you've got the war scroll for the new Bombardier guy, and then all the other war scrolls and all the other things. Now, the folks out there spend an hour breaking this down. They can tell you what's different. They can tell you all those sorts of things. But basically, this is just a brief overview. Then you've got your endless spells right here, which we're going to show you here in a second, and your pitch battle profiles. Those are all the points and things. So overall, it's definitely, if you play Skaven, you need this, obviously, to part of the Chaos faction in Age of Sigmar, and it seems like a good one so far. First up, terrain-wise, are the new Skaven Gnawholes, plural, because that's important. Notification, or distinction, I suppose, because Gnawhole in Gnawholes is an important distinction rules-wise here. So it's going to come with an instruction manual. It's going to have the War Scroll Battalion, and then you're going to get 6 big fat sprues that are all well, 3 of each of them are identical. So that's fine because all the Gnawholes are exactly identical. But we'll show you those here in a second and kind of do some explaining, because the war scrolls in the back here actually don't tell you how to set up. But instruction wise, I could see again with this set while some folks would maybe want this because it's a little swirly thing here, and while there are Skaven glyphs on the rocks, you could use this for something else. Now if you look carefully, once you assemble the sides here, there's there's 4 square spots where the little posts are going to actually go into this. They don't interfere too much with the little swirl themselves, and the swirl actually uses these little nubs to attach the little rock pieces here. So that being said, if you want to use it for something else, you definitely could, and I mean, why not? It's a neat little piece of terrain. Then you spend a whole bunch of time assembling all of this scaffolding and things and attaching the little sensors and the little warpfire brazzers onto it and a whole bunch of chains, which seem pretty thick once I kind of grab them. And I wouldn't worry too much about them snapping. As you can see, this one goes across right here, so it's really exposed. And I was kind of like, I hope that's thick, but it is. So that might work out. So here's a closer look at the detail on the sprues. So you can see nice big chunky Chinese plastic. It's not too bad detail wise, lots and lots of little swirls and stuff. There's those little squares that are going to be exposed, but the rest of it is going to be covered up by the rock pieces, and then some of the pieces that are going to go on the gantry right there, which we'll show you here in a sec. So here's the first, or here's the identical. So it's got one more swirl on it and then a whole bunch of little boards and stuff, and you can see all of the detail. The wood detail is in there. It's not like super crisp or anything, but it's there, and it'll definitely get painted. Big chunks of chain here. They are very, very beefy. You can see I'm putting a lot of pressure on them, and even though they're attached, they're not snapping off and destroying, self-destructing amongst themselves. Now, I was worried about the chunks here, and this is the very first piece that you actually assemble, part number 9. There's a little rat kind of up on there, and you can see right, where is it? Right, oh, this little nub right here, this little piece is actually where it sockets in to this piece over here, I think it's number 9, let's see. Number 9. They are actually, no, so that was 9, 12. It goes into 12. So there's the little nub that locks in. You can see it, and then back to number 9. Where's that? That's 11. I don't know where I got 9 from. So it's 12 and 11 assemble there, and there is, where is it? Where is the little socket? Oh, there it is right there. So lots and lots of space for it, and I think that is going to be a good, you can see like there's an open socket right there, and there's all different pieces in here that go into it. So if you look in the instructions, you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see like there's another big chunk. So they lock into each other. So hopefully, even if you drop them or mash them down, you're not gonna basically rip them apart with the stress to them. Oh, and I suppose rules wise we should have talked about this, but they don't exactly lay it out like what a Gnawhole is. A single terrain feature, that is one single Gnawhole. The Gnawholes plural are 3 of them, and there's restrictions on how they're set up. If you look in the book, the Battletome on page 81, it'll give you this little snapshot right here that there 3 can include up to 3 terrain features. Each one must wholly be set up within 8 inches of the edge and 3 inches from enemy units or objectives, and more than 1 inch away from any other terrain features. And then you take turns setting up terrain features, players, as far as that goes. Now, the rules for them are pretty interesting. There's a whole bunch of different, they help you and they hinder you as far as casting spells. Roll dice for each unit that finishes a charge within 1. It may suffer D3 mortal wounds, but maybe more importantly is that these guys, whole squads, if they're wholly within 6, can teleport to another Gnawhole anywhere that they are set up. So they basically pop out and set up wholly within 6 of another one right there. So pretty neat little mechanic. Like I said, they cost 0 points. So I can see where a lot of folks are going to want to skitter those Skaven across the table. Endless spell wise, there's 3 in here, but although these actually form together, and then you've got the bell and the little ravenous rats kind of thing that gives you a better look at them right there. Now these guys are 2 sprues, 2 big chunky sprues, lots and lots of little bases. So it's going to be 4 of the 40 mils, of course 1 for the bell, 1 for the little, I forget what they're called, little warpstone things, and then the large rat base right there is your flying stand kind of type deal. Sprue wise, there they are, 2 different sprues. Now everything goes together pretty much what you would expect. The bell is gonna really be the interesting one. Like if there is gonna be a gap on it, you want to definitely have some gap filler handy. But as far as the rest of it, I don't really see any issues with the vortexes, because you just basically glue them down on the base, and then you have to kind of set them up in that pattern. The Vermintide, however, is going to be interesting because they seem to slot in to the terrain features, and there isn't any like half rats or anything, but there's going to be a chunk of flash on them, unfortunately. So there you can kind of see more of that. And then you got some single rats that just kind of glue them down in line to kind of simulate and fill in all those gaps right there, which definitely makes sense. So there they are, and then there they are right there as they're kind of coming across all of that. Now as far as the spells go, interesting stuff, how they work. Like the Vermintide seems really good. Casting value of 7. You set it up 13 within 13 of the caster. It's predatory, so it can move up to 7 inches each turn. But remember, this is kind of chunky, so it's gonna have to clear. It doesn't have fly either, so it's gonna skitter across the ground. This one, after this model is moved, the player that moved it can pick 1 unit within 3 and roll 13 dice. That's the whole Skaven thing, right? So you roll 13 dice for each 6. The unit suffers 1 mortal wound. In addition, anytime a unit finishes normal move or charge within 3 inches, the same thing happens. For each 6, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. And also, when this model is set up, the player who set it up can immediately make a move with it, which makes sense. But remember, it doesn't have fly. And anything that is Skaven Tide is immune to these effects. So it's kind of one of those auto includes potentially. And I've seen, there's a Zinch spell for 40k that I've seen folks roll 5 6s on 12 dice. So it isn't exactly unheard of, although I'd say you'll get 2. Warp, Lightning, Vortex, you have to set these bad boys up within 7 inches. 26 of the caster and within 7 inches of all the models, equidistant, I believe. And then this one's a little bit different. Add 1 to spell dice roll. So you roll a dice for each unit within 6. If there's an extra one of these models, you add 1 to the dice. If they're within 3 of one of the 3 models, which would be kind of hard to do, I guess it had to be a really big squad. But regardless, then you'd add 3. And on any roll of a 4 up, I believe they take a mortal wound. Oh, it suffers D3 mortal wounds, which is even better. On an unmodified roll of 6, that unit, remember, unmodified, so you don't get the pluses. You just have to roll the 6. That unit suffers D6 mortal wounds. Womp, womp, womp. Also, probably more importantly, I would imagine, units cannot run or fly when they make a normal move that starts within 6 of any of the models from this endless spell. So that's a really big footprint. Keep that in mind. Battletome, I don't know what's going on. You just basically throw it out. It's predatory, and you ring it. You roll 3d6. If you roll a 13, it does bad things. Everything within 13 suffers D3 mortal wounds, but it's 3d6, and you got to roll a 13. So it's not going to happen very often, but if it does, it does. And it's worth casting, I suppose, if you have the ability to. However, probably the thing that's better is that you don't have to take battle shock tests for any Skaven Tide units that are within 13 of this model, and you subtract 1 from the bravery of any other units that are within 13 of this model. So I could see that getting used more, or having it be cast more for that ability, and just rolling those 3d6. And hey, if you get that 13, you get that 13. But it's not going to happen very often. As far as the sprues themselves go, well, just like I said, be very careful, because you're going to have a lot of flash across the top right here. All these little rats and stuff. It's going to be a lot of flash. But once you get them together, there isn't any half rats or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. And the tops here, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of flash along the sides here, but those are just going to glue down onto the little, what are they? Little vortex things right here, which are going to be left and right halves. And what's cool about these, they're not left and right halves. I was just looking at that. They are just straight up, you clip them off and put them down. So pretty easy, right? Detail wise, not too bad. You could airbrush and stuff, and I'm sure it'll be fine, or do a white primer and do a bunch of glazes. Now this right here looks like it locks in pretty good for the two halves of the bell, but I would imagine you're still going to see a little bit of gapping, so be careful with that and make sure you get a nice good seal right there so you don't see this big stupid gap down the middle of it. Although it may perhaps hide it with this little bit of energy blast right here and this one right here, even if there is a little bit of a gap. But either way, don't forget you can always get a little bit of Vallejo plastic putty to fill those gaps. Now size wise, you know, these things are only about 3 inches tall, so they're pretty easy to transport if you don't glue this down, but there's lots of area in there that perhaps you can magnetize it right there, which seems like a really smart idea. And last but certainly not least are the Skaven dice. There's no flesh eater dice this week, but these are kind of cool. They're $30, and usually they charge a little bit more for the $30 or for the square edge ones, where these are, they're noticeably lighter. Like, I feel like they're lighter. They're hard dice. I'm not sure if it's like a piece that goes around or whether they glued in those little warpstone-y kind of chunks, but it's all done very well. It doesn't look like they missed any spots for paint or anything like that. They are a little shiny and semi-slippery, and they don't weigh a lot. So if you're used to chucking huge handfuls of dice, you may want to put less oomph on it when you kick them out of your hands right there. Lots of 6s, actually. This is a really good roll. Wow, look at that. That was 3 right there, so that were really terrible, and lots more that weren't. I think there's 20 dice right here. I'm pretty sure there's 20 dice. I hope there's 20 dice. For $30, I would really hope, yeah, there's 20 dice. Okay, so let's roll our 3d6 3 times and see if we can get us a 13. Nope. Oh, there it is. Did it the second try. Boom. Exactly what we needed, and the third time, nope, not quite. Almost, but not quite. So there it is. 3 tries, and we got our 13. Everything within 13 inches takes D3 mortal wounds. Boom. Took 2. That could clear out some troops, I would think right there. So that is it for this one. I know we didn't keep it to 15 minutes, but I like to talk, and I like to tell you guys everything I think about the new releases. Overall, Skaven and, of course, Flesh Eater players are definitely jumping for joy as these 2 books and all of the accessories right down to the new Carrion Empire box set, which is a separate video, seem to be just what the doctor ordered for this faction. How it's gonna shake out in, you know, organized player, competitive play is anybody's guess at this point, but Flesh Eaters were always very resilient, and Skaven are always up to tricks, so I definitely would plan on seeing a lot more of these 2 factions in the future for Age of Sigmar. So thank you very much for watching this video, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can be the very first to like and comment on all our videos.